Hello, everybody. How are you today? I am Jennifer Longmore, founder and CEO of Soul Journeys and CEO of the Podcast Connector. Depending on where you're watching this, that will determine whether this makes sense to you or not. Anyways, we are going to be talking today about lurkers. I hear this a lot. And if you've been in my world for a while, you know that I say that leaders are not lurkers. And yet they weirdly kind of are. So I'm going to kind of differentiate for you what this really means and some inner shifts that maybe you can make in order to shift this, and additionally some outer things that you can do. So when people are in my paid spaces, especially in masterminds and so on, it doesn't feel good for anybody in the group to have someone that's always on the periphery, not really leaning in, right? Being an observer, hearing what other people are doing, maybe studying what they're doing. Like in the absence of information, the person that's constantly sharing in a mastermind and knows there's tons of other members and nobody's really contributing, that makes it feel uneasy for them, right? And of course, for me as the leader of said group, it's my job to spot that and to be inspiring people to participate. So I say in those kind of spaces, look, like if you're in a mastermind, you're investing at this kind of level, leaders are not lurkers, right? You're here because you want to collaborate, you want feedback on your business, you want to tap into the compounding intellectual capital in the group. So how can we inspire you to lean in? How can we, what if you are triggered or you're caught in your stuff or there's some learned helplessness going on, what code word do you want me to use? How do you want me to bring it to your attention that you're on the periphery? Because I actually owe it to the entire group, right? To make sure that everyone's participating. That's why we join a mastermind instead of doing one-on-one coaching or various things like that. So there's times and places to call out lurking, right? And a lot of times it's, especially in a high level mastermind, a lot of times it's just that people are used to working independently. They got to a certain level of success because they were the lone wolf. But it's also likely the thing that's preventing them from moving to the next level. So whatever people are doing in their business, as an example, they're going to bring that into our containers because that's the whole point. They're stepping in because they want to work through it. They're not aware that part of that process involves mirrors and having projections and so on reflected back to see how things can shift. So with that in mind, leaders are not lurkers in your paid communities, and yet they can be lurkers in your social media communities and on your email list and so on. And there's a few different reasons for that. One is that they like you, but they don't really know what you do, right? They like how they feel when you're connected or they're connected to you, but maybe our messaging isn't clear. Maybe we're not being consistent in our messaging. A confused buyer can't buy and an unclear buyer can't buy, right? So that's the first place to check is, am I being super clear in what I do and how I can help people? And am I communicating that consistently? Am I really marketing consistently, educating the marketplace on how I can help them? So that means that, yes, we might have a gazillion opinions about all kinds of things, from cheese to, how to clean up the oceans to everything in between, right? The big stuff and the mundane stuff. It's fine to share that stuff occasionally, but if there's too much of that and people are unclear, they just can't buy, right? And leaders want to be able to do a trust fall with someone, and someone that is truly leading their communities, it should be really clear why I'm in your community, and do you have the capacity to hold me through my transformation, as an example. The second thing around messaging is that beige is a great color, vanilla is a great ice cream flavor, and there's a reason why Baskin & Robbins created 30 other flavors, right? I know they have more, but you get what I'm saying, and Ben & Jerry's and so on. And there's a reason why we have clothing that's beyond beige, which is ironic that I'm sharing this right now wearing a relatively beige sweater. Anyways, there's a time and a place to be bolder in your messaging, to take a stand. There's going to be times where And not everyone's going to agree with me on this, and I'm totally cool with that. I do think there's a time and a place to let your community know where you stand on some pretty significant political matters, because they want to know who they're buying from. And not that they need to know everything about us, but just as, I have a dog, and so dog people tend to resonate with me, or animal people in general, because they know I'm a big animal person. I'm big on, contributing to animal sanctuaries and various things like that. So that can be a bonding point, right? That's an example of how I'm sharing an aspect of me that has nothing to do with all of the things that I run a business around, but there's a resonance that gets created, right? So that's great. And we know this happens, is my point. But then there's also times where if we discovered that someone was, just throwing this out here, and I know it's going to poke some things, but I'm doing this for a reason. Like at the podcast connector, I'm not going to be taking on a client that's a Holocaust denier. It's just not going to happen. We don't need that kind of business. We don't need to help them spread their message, right? So there's going to be a level of vetting that occurs before we take on a client, to make sure that we are honoring the relationships with the hosts that we have, and of course, maintaining a certain reputation for our community and various things like that. But just on a personal level, I'm not interested in doing that dance with people. I can't respect that. I'm adamantly against that viewpoint, and there's a lot of reasons why I am. But suffice it to say that I would want to know that if I was going to be doing business with someone, especially someone that is coming into my psyche, right? Someone that's helping me with mindset or energy work or things like that. And again, I know that is a big example to use, but that's kind of, it's important. And I'm guessing if this is important to you as an example, that you would also want to know that from people. It doesn't mean that we have to be interviewing people like crazy, but we do need to know where we stand. And so if you've been following me the last few years, I've been making some pretty bold statements about what I see happening in the world. And I also read the room, and I see, where does it make sense for me to share that? Where does it not? And additionally, I'm okay. I totally own the cause and effect of what may happen if someone doesn't agree with my opinion, right? I don't believe my opinions are damaging at all. They might be received that way. I obviously don't believe they are, or else I wouldn't be sharing them, right? But I recognize that if I were, which I'm not a Holocaust denier, that would be immensely damaging to millions and millions and millions of people, and all the other, ripple effects of that. So point is that, but there is a time to be bold. I think there are times to be making commentary about politics where it's appropriate for values alignment for people. And I know and I'm not either, if you're not a political pundit, then it doesn't make sense to constantly bombard your newsfeed with political commentary, especially if you're not an expert in politics. And so we want to make sure that we're not pushing people away simply because that's not why they came to us. Maybe they came to us because they feel like our spaces are joyful or whatever. And so when it starts to not feel that way, they're going to be moving along. But it is important to make some bold statements from time to time, I believe, because it's going to pull in the lurkers. Back to my point of this talk today. It's going to pull in the lurkers that were like, oh, that's what I needed to hear to know that I feel really comfortable doing business with this company or this person. And ultimately, it might push people away, and that's okay too, right? Because if people are already looking for a way out, that's why people are lurking. They're still trying to decide, right? If you're the person that's going to support them or not. That's one of the reasons. There's a lot of other reasons where lurkers are just going to lurk in every community because either they have some significant learned helplessness, or there's some sort of thing going on for them where they're just always going to be swimming in the limbo of possibilities and never really, making a move. But I'm talking about actual leaders. There's times where people really appreciate bold statements. And I can say that I got much bolder in my statements over the last few years. and our business revenue went up 180% from 2020 to 2021, doing nothing different other than me just kind of letting it rip a little bit. And from 2021 to 2022, the revenue went up 256%. I only know this because my accountants tell me this stuff. I don't actually pay attention to that kind of thing, but I thought that was significant because I had to really look at it and say, okay, well, what was different? I actually offered less. I worked less. I didn't offer nearly as much one-to-one. And I wasn't speaking on stages, meaning like in-person stages, because I wasn't going anywhere, and many of us were not going anywhere. So, and then on top of that, there's just a lot going on for people, right? People are having a harder time buying right now because they're at surge capacity, right? It's hard to make decisions when we're in massive surge capacity, when our adrenals are beyond the point of burnout, and where we're in self-preservation mode, right? Then we're just trying to stay confined in that self-preservation. We're just trying to cope. So we're all noticing this, right? It doesn't help that there's rhetoric around recessions and things like that, right? But we can still, and my company still does, generate a lot of business in spite of the times that we're being told that we're in. So we get to choose whether we want to buy into that or not. But I will say that I'm absolutely certain that me taking a greater stand for certain things and declaring it publicly, although I'm sure a lot of people moved away from me because of that, the people that are in my communities now are very aligned. And that was me sharing some core values that are just non-negotiable for me, and who I want to be linking arms with and who I don't. So my point is, don't shy away from speaking your truth. The leaders are either unclear and they just need a little more clarity on either your messaging or some of your stands on things in the world, because they're looking for value alignment. Additionally, a lot of leaders are lurkers in your public spaces because they either don't want to comment on your post. Like the amount of people that I see posting things like, what are you struggling with right now? This is a big news bulletin. Nobody's going to answer that. The only people that are going to answer that are struggle bunnies. No leader with a reputable community that's known for whatever is going to publicly comment on your posts and say, yes, I'm struggling with making more money, or I'm struggling with being confident, or I'm struggling with whatever. Doesn't mean they have anything to hide, but they do have to protect their brand. They do have to, present themselves a certain way because people are looking to them to lead, and there needs to be a certain vote of confidence, so to speak, right? We all have our stuff, but they're not going to publicly display it, in part because they don't know who's going to read it. They don't know if it's going to be taken in context. And on top of that, another reason why leaders are not commenting on our posts, even if they are invitational and they have more of a peer focus, right? Speaking peer-to-peer to people, which is how leaders want to be spoken to. They're busy, right? I had someone recently tell me, oh my goodness, someone noticed that you commented on my post. A few people private messaged me and said, Jennifer Longmore commented on my post. You've made it wet. And I thought, well, that's an interesting comment to make. I do comment on people's posts all the time, but I have a lot of connections. I have a lot of people I really adore. And there's truly only so much time in a day, right? I'm busy running 3 companies, running a household, taking my son to school, picking him up, all kinds of things. I only have so much time. So just because I'm not commenting, and I use me as an example, but just because people are not commenting on our posts doesn't mean that they're not seeing them. And you'll know this because those same people are coming into your messenger or your inbox, whatever, and saying, hey, I just saw your post about such and such, or hey, I saw that you were offering such and such a few weeks ago. Are you still offering that? And that's how you know, but they're not going to be commenting publicly. So the tip here is to find ways to invite people to have private conversations with you. I'm not talking about sales calls. Nobody wants to get on sales calls anymore, right? People love to buy, but they don't want to be sold to, typically. So how can you create a high value exchange with someone that they can do with you privately so that they can determine whether they want to lean in or not? And then another way to do this, I do this in my Facebook group, I do this on LinkedIn, is I create polls. I want to find out what do people really want right now. I can think that I know what people want. I can even be observing what's happening on other people's profiles and think that I know what people want. But they're coming to me and they're coming to you for reasons that are separate and apart potentially from what we're seeing online, right? And so why are they coming to you? What is it that they're really wanting help with? They don't want help with the transformation. They don't want to feel more aligned or more peaceful or whatever. Yes, they want that. But really what they want is to release weight, to attract more clients, to make more money, to expand their influence, various things like that. And in going after what they want, they discover all of the things that are in the way of that. And yes, you're going to be offering transformation potentially with that. But that's not why they're coming in the door. That's not their conscious reason why they're coming in the door. So we tend to market to the transformation and not to what people want. And that can be the disconnect. So we need to ask people, what do they want? So I recommend building this in, every few weeks to be polling people in your different communities. You can even do that to your email list to get a sense of, am I still connected with my community, right? Do I have a good pulse on what they really want? That doesn't mean that you have to offer what they want if that doesn't light you up. All things being equal, it has to light you up first, or else you're just not going to do it, right? It's going to be a struggle to fill that kind of stuff. And the last thing that I want to put out there, and this isn't necessarily relevant to all situations, but I do want to put it out there because I have people that lurk in my community too, and sometimes I make more meaning out of it than I need to, right? This is why I'm giving you these examples of where people might be perceived to be lurking when in fact they're just unclear, or they don't really know where we stand on certain things, or they didn't realize it was important for them to know that kind of stuff. Or we're just not speaking to what they want, or we're asking them to publicly declare things that they'd rather do so privately, right? So let's separate that out and talk about the other piece of this, which is, are you being a lurker, right? Are you benefiting from being in people's communities because you're there as a taker, right? You maybe have mentorship in other spaces, but you're hanging out in certain people's spaces because you're either trying to emulate what they're doing, right? So that's a taking energy. You're only there to abscond with someone's model or someone's languaging or someone's IP, right? That's a reason. Not saying anyone's doing that, but putting that out there as an option. And it's also okay for you as well, if you have lurkers in your community, to tune into that and be like, okay, this is my sense. And you don't need to wait for the empirical evidence. If you're getting a strong spidey sense that someone's in your world for reasons other than you would like them to be, right? It's okay to bump people out. Nobody's entitled to have access to you. You're allowed to increase your boundaries and standards around who gets access to you, who gets access to your energy, your IP, etc. But a lot of times people that are complaining about lurkers are lurkers themselves. So it's not necessarily a definitive thing, right? But it is something to look at and say, okay, am I in a ton of communities where I'm there to just take, right? It's very different to take versus receive. But if you're in other people's spaces to take, then it shouldn't be surprising that you have a ton of lurkers in your space as well, right? So it's a little bit tricky because there are a ton of people on the planet. Keep in mind that 10% of the population are natural leaders. The other 20% can be taught leadership successfully if they choose it. So that means 70% of people on the planet follow. They don't initiate. They're passive. They're passive participants in their life. They don't really own the cause and effect of their choices, and they want other people to tell them what to do. They really are not comfortable in their decision making. They don't have the capacity to make decisions the way leaders do, right? So they're just going to be showing up very differently in our worlds than the people that are acting as true embodied leaders. So knowing that a good chunk of people are going to lurk because they're followers, and they like the idea of what we represent, or they one day, someday, possibly might eventually kind of sort of might want to actually take an action or two towards the thing that they keep admiring in us, but can't understand why we have it and they don't, right? There's all of that kind of stuff too. But so we're going to have some struggle bunnies, is what I'm saying. That's inevitable. I don't care whose community it is. If people say I don't have lurkers because blah blah blah, that's actually not true. There's always going to be a percentage of leader or lurkers in your community. Even from an email marketing perspective, we know that 80% of the people on your email list will never buy from you. You're really only marketing to 20% of people that are going to buy from you, anywhere from one time only all the way to being a regular customer. So side note, little reminder as to why it's important to build your email community, right? Because as much as it's not a numbers game, it is kind of, right? If you have 100 people on your email list and only 20 people are buying from you, that's not a sustainable business model. But anyways, we have a huge percentage of people that are going to be in our spaces that are just not going to convert. They're just not going to, and that's okay. We do this work anyways because we want to inspire people and so on. But of that 20% of people that can buy from you, if they're still in that lurking zone, as I mentioned, it's either because there's some tweaks in leadership that need to happen, some bolder messaging, some clarity and consistency around messaging, and giving people the opportunity to speak privately. I can say for me, I'm never going to declare publicly that I've got certain things going on that I'm struggling with. Now, granted, I'm not really struggling with all that much because I'm a pretty conscious co-creator and take full responsibility for what I'm choosing, what I'm creating, etc. But of course, there's times where there's little niggles that come up and I stay on top of that. But what I'm looking for, by the way, and this is another hot tip for you, is that leaders respond to stats, right? Leaders don't want to read long ass posts. They don't want to listen to 3-hour podcasts. They don't want to do any of that. They just want to know, what are the results you're getting for people like me? So this is why it's so important to showcase your case studies every single week in whatever way you feel that it's good to do that, and really pay attention, right? Sharing an example of how you've helped someone, what's the immediate result, so that the leaders that are already watching you, the lurkers that are already watching you, that are leaders but just not stepping in, can see, oh, this person actually gets someone results. Like just recently, I posted that the podcast connector, I found this out because my team was sending me information. I said, by the way, like these numbers don't mean anything to me. What is the industry average for the close rate on going from pitched to actually being booked? What's the close rate? The industry average was 8%. That's crazy. That's crazy. There is no reason why it shouldn't be higher. Ours is almost triple the conversion rate, and we're just getting started in building some new relationships, right? So that's important information. But I shared that because I know that leaders are looking for results. I know that they want to understand the metrics. So when I share that, all of a sudden, I get a ton of messages. We get a ton of applications coming in because it's a legitimate fact, but it's something that speaks to leaders. Leaders don't want to know that they're going to go through a whole process with us or any company like us, only to find out that they're being pitched 500 times and they're getting one podcast out of that. They want to know, right? Like they want to move quickly. How many podcasts can you guarantee me a month? It's really quite simple. So anyways, I hope this helped. That was a lot of information I know to throw at you, but let me know in the comments what spoke to you, what you might want to chat about further. And if you do want to really move the needle with your client attraction, definitely recommend that you reach out to me privately and chat. I have created the Exponential Client Attraction Mastermind. So this is the mastermind where I'm going to be sharing my 8-figure client attraction ecosystem, right? So for those of you that don't know, I have an 8-figure company, and there's certain things that I've done over the last almost 20 years that have guaranteed waiting lists and full programs and various things like that have allowed me to increase my rates exponentially and so on, all while still focusing on being of high service, right? And being in integrity and really focusing on helping people and focusing on how many prayers can we answer today, essentially. So I'm sharing my client attraction ecosystem, my client retention ecosystem. We're going to be going over how to have six-figure challenges. We have multi-six-figure challenges every time we run them. We're going to be teaching our successful summit thing to attract clients if that's interesting. These are all bonuses, by the way. I'm going to be teaching about how to create quick cash injections. This has worked for me and my clients for many, many years. And, how to sell without getting on sales calls, all the no to low cost things that, I'm not anti Facebook ads or any other kind of ads. There's a time and a place for those, but certainly when you're wanting to keep your profit margins, much higher and you're wanting to keep as much money in the company as possible to reinvest it in some really high dividend things, then ads aren't always the best option for people to spend, depending on the stage you're at in business. So this isn't for people that are completely new. This is for people that already have some sort of proven offer, but they know that they need to really exponentialize their client attraction without working harder. So if this is something that speaks to you, definitely private message me and we can chat about whether it's even going to be useful to you, right? Based on where you're at in business. And if it's not, I might have something else available that will be more aligned. And if I don't, I have some colleagues that I really trust. And I don't get referral commissions for that, just sharing that I have some colleagues I trust who are amazing at business coaching as well and expanding businesses. So happy to make referrals again if it turns out that it's not useful. But all you need to do is just private message me. We can chat about that and I can learn a little bit more about your business, because I don't like to receive compensation if I don't think I can be useful to people. If I think there's something that's more useful to you, I will definitely let you know. So I hope this helped. I will see you again next week. I so appreciate being connected to you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.